The sky turned red on the day humanity died. 500,000 years ago, they came without warning. Their ships blocked out the sun over every major city on Earth. They did not send messages. They did not make demands. They simply began to fire. The plasma beams fell like rain from the heavens. New York vanished in the first 3 minutes. London followed seconds later. Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, Sydney, Cairo, and 100 other cities turned to ash and glass before anyone could understand what was happening. The oceans boiled where the beams struck the water. Mountains cracked and split apart. The air itself caught fire in some places, burning so hot that sand melted into rivers of glass. 8 billion human beings lived on Earth that morning. By nightfall, almost all of them were dead. They were an ancient species. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for millions of years. They saw themselves as the highest form of life, the natural masters of all they surveyed. When their sensors detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, they sent scouts to investigate. The scouts reported back that the planet was home to a primitive species that had only recently discovered how to leave their own atmosphere. The High Council discussed the matter for exactly 12 minutes before reaching a decision. The humans were pests. They were spreading across their planet like insects, consuming resources and making noise that disturbed the peace of space. They had dealt with such species before. The solution was always the same: extermination. But they made a mistake that day. In their arrogance, they did not bother to scan the entire planet before they began their attack. They did not notice the 17 ships that launched from hidden bases around the world in the final hours before the bombardment began. They did not track those ships as they fled into the darkness between stars. They simply assumed that their work was complete and moved on to other matters. Those 17 ships carried the last hope of humanity. Each one held 10,000 people in frozen sleep. Each one carried genetic samples of every plant and animal on Earth. Each one contained the complete recorded history of human civilization, every book ever written, every song ever sung, every discovery ever made. The ships were called seed ships because they carried everything needed to plant humanity somewhere new. The journey was long and terrible. The ships had no destination. They simply flew away from Earth as fast as their engines could carry them, scattering in different directions so that even if they found some of them, others might escape. For 50 years, the ships drifted through empty space while their frozen passengers slept. Then, one by one, they found places to hide. Some settled on moons orbiting gas giants in systems they had never explored. Others hid in asteroid belts, hollowing out rocks to build hidden cities. A few found habitable worlds in the vast empty spaces between the spiral arms of the galaxy, where no civilization had ever thought to look. The survivors woke from their long sleep and began to rebuild. It was slow work. They had to start from almost nothing, using the knowledge stored in their computers to create the tools they needed to survive. Many of them died in those early years. Disease took some. Accidents took others. The harsh environments of their new homes claimed still more, but enough survived, enough remembered. The children of those survivors grew up hearing stories about Earth. They learned about blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched from horizon to horizon. They learned about the billions of people who had lived and loved and dreamed on that distant world. And they learned about the monsters who had taken everything from them. Every generation passed these stories to the next. The memory of Earth became sacred. The hatred of the became a religion. 500,000 years is a long time. Empires rose and fell. Species evolved and went extinct. Stars were born and died, but humanity endured. They grew stronger with each passing century. They mastered technologies that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors. They learned to bend space and time to their will. They built ships that could cross the galaxy in days instead of centuries. They created weapons that could crack planets in half. And through it all, they never forgot. They never forgave. Commander Lisa Monroe was born on a space station orbiting a brown dwarf star in the outer reaches of the galaxy. She had never seen Earth with her own eyes. No living human had. But she knew every detail of that lost world as if she had grown up there. She knew the names of the continents and the depths of the oceans. She knew the songs that children had sung and the prayers that the faithful had whispered. She knew the exact coordinates of the planet in space, passed down through countless generations like a sacred text. Lisa rose through the ranks of the human military with a single purpose driving her forward. She trained harder than anyone else. She studied longer. She pushed herself beyond every limit because she knew that one day humanity would return to reclaim what had been taken from them. She wanted to be the one who led them home. Now she stood on the observation deck of the Remembrance, the greatest warship humanity had ever built. The ship was 3 kilometers long, made from living metal that could heal itself when damaged. It was powered by captured black holes that gave it nearly unlimited energy. Its weapons could tear holes in the fabric of space itself, and it was only one of 7,000 similar ships that made up the reclamation fleet. Lisa looked out at the stars, her reflection ghostly in the transparent metal of the viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, lay Earth. The planet was healing now, according to the long-range probes they had sent. The oceans had returned. The atmosphere had regenerated. Life was spreading across the surface again, though none of it was human. The world that had given birth to their species was waiting for them to come home. But first, there was business to attend to. Her executive officer, Daniel Burke, entered the observation deck and stood beside her. He was a tall man with gray eyes and a face that rarely showed emotion. They had served together for 30 years, and Lisa trusted him more than anyone else in the fleet. "All ships report ready, Commander," he said. "We can begin the jump sequence on your order." Lisa nodded slowly. She had waited her entire life for this moment. Her parents had waited. Her grandparents had waited. 100,000 generations of humans had waited, dreaming of this day when they would finally have the strength to take back what was theirs. "Set course for Prime," she said. "It is time for our people to go home." The fleet began to move, 7,000 ships sliding through folds in space toward a confrontation 500,000 years in the making. They had forgotten about humanity long ago. They were about to remember. The message arrived on Prime 14 hours before the fleet. It came on every frequency they used for communication. It interrupted military channels and civilian broadcasts alike. It appeared on screens in government buildings and private homes. Every on the planet heard the same words at the same moment. 500,000 years ago you burned our world. You killed our families. You thought you had ended us. You were wrong. We are humanity and we have come home. Hai was eating his morning meal when the message played on his personal screen. He stopped with food halfway to his mouth, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. The words meant nothing to him at first. Humanity was not a name he recognized. No species by that name existed in any database he had ever seen. He set down his food and called for his advisors. Within the hour, the highest-ranking members of the government had gathered in the council chamber, all of them equally confused by the strange transmission. "It must be a trick," said Admiral or Commander of the Home Fleet. "Some conquered species trying to frighten us with ghost stories." "Then explain where the signal came from," replied Minister Is, who oversaw intelligence operations. "Our tracking systems show it originated from beyond our monitored space, from a direction where no ships have traveled in recorded history." Raised a clawed hand for silence. "Search the archives. Find any record of a species called humanity. I want to know who is threatening us." The archivists worked for hours, digging through records that stretched back millions of years. They kept detailed files on every species they encountered, every world they conquered, every enemy they destroyed. But 500,000 years was a long time, and many old records had been compressed or corrupted or simply forgotten. Finally, a young archivist named A found what they were looking for. She projected the ancient file onto the main screen of the council chamber, her scales pale with nervousness at being the center of so much attention. Humans, she read aloud. A primitive species native to a single planet called Earth in the outer regions of Sector 7. They were eliminated during routine territorial expansion approximately 500,000 years ago. The operation was classified as pest control, requiring minimal resources. Total population eliminated was approximately 8 billion. Time required for complete extinction was 72 standard hours. The commanding officer of the operation did not receive special recognition because the task was considered too simple to merit reward. The council chamber fell silent, stared at the screen, trying to process what he had just heard. 8 billion beings killed in 3 days, and the officer responsible had not even been commended for his work. They had treated the destruction of an entire species as nothing more than routine maintenance. And now they claim to have survived, he asked. Before anyone could answer, Admiral or received an urgent message on his personal communicator. His scales shifted to gray as he read it, a color that indicated fear among the. "Hi," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Our long-range sensors are detecting spatial distortions at the edge of the system. Multiple signatures consistent with translation drives." "How many?" "We count over 5,000 individual ships so far. More are appearing every minute." Felt his heart begin to race. The entire military consisted of 12,000 warships spread across 300 star systems. To have 5,000 enemy vessels appear at the meant this was not a raid or a probe. This was an invasion force. "Scramble the home fleet," he ordered. "All 800 ships. Contact every colonial governor and tell them to send reinforcements immediately." "The nearest reinforcements are 3 weeks away, Hi." "Then we will hold until they arrive." The home fleet launched within the hour. 800 warships formed a defensive line at the edge of the system, their weapons charged and ready. They were the finest ships in the Dominion, crewed by the best officers, armed with the most powerful weapon science could produce. Admiral or took personal command from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a massive dreadnought that had never lost a battle in its 400 years of service. The human fleet continued to appear, ship after ship emerging from folds in space. The final count reached 7,200 vessels, each one at least as large as a destroyer. At the center of the formation floated a ship larger than anything or had ever seen, a behemoth 3 kilometers long that seemed to drink in the light around it. "Open a channel," or commanded. "Let us see who we are dealing with." The flickered, and a human face appeared, or studied the creature with curiosity. He had never seen a human before. The species had been extinct for so long that even images of them had been lost. The being on screen had pale skin and dark hair, with 2 small eyes that stared at him with an expression he could not read. "I am Admiral or of the Dominion," he announced. "You are trespassing in sovereign territory. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." The human showed her teeth, which or later learned was called a smile. "I am Commander Lisa Monroe of the Human Reclamation Fleet. Our intentions are simple, Admiral. We have come to collect a debt." "What debt?" "Your ancestors killed 8 billion of our people. They burned our world to ash. They thought they had destroyed us completely. They were wrong. We have spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. We have grown strong. We have built weapons you cannot imagine. And now we have returned to make you pay for what you did." Or felt a chill run through his body. He had fought many battles in his long career. He had faced enemies who outnumbered him and enemies with superior technology. But he had never faced an enemy who had waited 500,000 years for revenge. That kind of patience was terrifying. "That was ancient history," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "None of us were alive when that happened. You cannot hold us responsible for the actions of our distant ancestors." The human called Lisa Monroe leaned forward, her eyes cold. Your species still celebrates the conquest of what you call the outer territories. Your children still learn that the elimination of lesser species is a noble act. You have continued to enslave and destroy every civilization you encounter. You are exactly what your ancestors were. The only difference is that now you face a species you cannot kill. We shall see about that, or replied and closed the channel. He turned to his tactical officers, his scales now showing the deep blue of determination. All ships, prepare to engage. We will show these primitives what warriors are capable of. The fleet moved forward, 800 warships advancing towards 7,000 human vessels. Or did not know it yet, but he was leading his crews into a slaughter. The battle lasted 6 minutes. In those 6 minutes, the entire concept of military superiority died along with 800 warships. Admiral ordered his fleet to fire first. 800 ships unleashed their plasma lances simultaneously, the same weapons their ancestors had used to burn Earth 500,000 years ago. The beams were bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at them. Each one carried enough energy to melt through a kilometer of solid rock. They had destroyed countless enemy vessels over the centuries. The beams struck the human fleet and simply disappeared. The human ships did not explode. They did not even shake. Their shields absorbed the plasma energy like a sponge absorbing water, converting the attack into fuel for their own systems. Or stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Fire again," he commanded. "All weapons, continuous barrage." His fleet obeyed, pouring everything they had at the human formation. Plasma lances, kinetic missiles, particle beams, nuclear warheads. They threw every weapon in their arsenal at the enemy. None of it made any difference. The human shields held without a single flicker. Then the humans fired back. Commander Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, watching the attack with something close to pity. Their weapons were primitive, barely more advanced than what humanity had possessed when Earth was destroyed. They had spent 500,000 years conquering weaker species and had never bothered to improve their technology. Why would they? No one had ever challenged them. "Fire pattern Omega," she ordered calmly. "One shot per target, no need to waste ammunition." The Remembrance responded with a single beam from its primary weapon. The beam was not made of plasma or particles or any form of energy that could understand. It was a concentrated stream of gravitational force, bending space itself into a weapon. The beam struck the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Orr's flagship, and the massive dreadnought crumpled like paper being crushed in a fist. The hull collapsed inward, compressed by forces that no material could resist. In less than a second, the largest warship in the fleet had been reduced to a ball of twisted metal, no larger than a small house. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human weapons tore through ships as if they were made of air. Some vessels simply exploded as gravitational beams ripped them apart. Others were cut in half by focused antimatter streams. A few were erased from existence entirely by weapons that temporarily removed sections of space from the universe. They tried to flee. Their ships turned and ran, engines burning at maximum power as they raced toward the safety of the inner system. But the human fleet was faster. Vessels that had crossed the galaxy in days had no trouble catching ships that could barely travel between stars. One by one, the remaining warships were hunted down and destroyed. When it was over, Lisa ordered her fleet to hold position. Not a single human ship had been damaged. Not a single human life had been lost. 800 warships and their crews had been annihilated in the time it took to eat a light meal. "Open a channel to the planet," she said. "Let me speak to their leader." Hai had watched the battle from his palace on Prime. He had seen the destruction of his home fleet in real time, transmitted by observation drones that the humans had not bothered to destroy. He had watched the Eternal Dominion crumple like a toy. He had seen Admiral Orr, his oldest friend, die without even having time to scream. When the communication request came from the human fleet, he considered refusing. He considered ordering the planetary defense systems to open fire, even though he knew they would be just as useless as the fleet had been. He considered taking his own life rather than face the humiliation of surrender. In the end, he accepted the call. He was the High of the Dominion. His people needed him to face this enemy, even if that meant accepting defeat. The human commander appeared on his screen. She looked calm, almost peaceful, as if she had just finished a pleasant walk rather than the destruction of 800 warships. "Hi," she said. "I am Commander Lisa Monroe. I believe we have things to discuss." "You have destroyed our fleet," replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "What more is there to discuss? If you mean to kill us all, then do it and be done." Lisa shook her head slowly. "If we wanted to kill you all, we would have done so already. We have weapons that could crack your planet in half. We could sterilize this world in minutes, just as your ancestors did to Earth. But that is not why we came." "Then why?" demanded. "Why return after so long? Why attack us now?" "We came to collect a debt," Lisa said. "Your ancestors took everything from us. Our world, our people, our future. We have spent 500,000 years preparing to take it back. But we have also spent those years learning something your species never understood." "What is that?" "The difference between justice and revenge." Lisa leaned forward, her eyes holding his. "Revenge would be easy. We could do to you exactly what you did to us. We could burn your cities, boil your oceans, kill every last one of your people. We have the power. We have the right. Your ancestors gave us that right when they slaughtered 8 billion innocent beings." Said nothing. There was nothing he could say. She was right. "But revenge would not bring our people back," Lisa continued. "It would not restore our world. It would only make us into the same monsters your ancestors were, and we refuse to become that. We have suffered too much, waited too long, to throw away our souls now." "Then what do you want?" asked. "If not our destruction, then what?" Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We want you to understand what you are. We want you to see yourselves clearly for the first time in your history, and we want you to change." She outlined her terms in simple, clear language. The Dominion would be dissolved. Every species they had conquered would be freed. Every slave would be released. Every monument to supremacy would be torn down. The military would be dismantled, their weapons destroyed, their warships scrapped. In exchange, the people would be allowed to live. They would keep their and 2 colony systems. They would be permitted to govern themselves and maintain their culture. But they would never again threaten another civilization. They would never again conquer or enslave. They would become a small, peaceful species in a galaxy full of free peoples. "And if we refuse?" asked. Lisa's expression did not change. "Then we will do to you what you did to us. Not quickly as you destroyed Earth, but slowly. We will burn your colonies one by one, starting with the oldest and working inward. We will destroy your ability to travel between stars. We will leave your surviving populations isolated on dying worlds, unable to help each other, unable to rebuild. And when we finally reach this planet, we will not kill you. We will leave you here alone to remember what your empire once was. You will live, but you will live with the knowledge that everything your species built has been reduced to ashes." Closed his eyes. He thought about his children, about all the generations of who would come after him. He thought about the empire his ancestors had built over millions of years, and he thought about the 8 billion humans who had died screaming as plasma rained from the sky. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "You have 1 hour," Lisa replied. "Use it wisely." The hour passed in silence. Hai sat alone in his chamber while his advisors argued in the next room. He could hear their voices through the walls, some demanding defiance, others begging for surrender. None of them understood what he understood. The choice had already been made the moment the human fleet appeared. Everything else was just formality. He thought about the history of his people. For millions of years, they had been the supreme power in their region of the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species, enslaved billions of beings, built an empire that stretched across 300 star systems. They had believed themselves invincible, chosen by fate to rule over all lesser creatures. That belief had been the foundation of their civilization. Now that foundation had crumbled in 6 minutes of battle. Called his advisors back into the chamber. Their scales showed every color of the emotional spectrum: fear, anger, shame, desperation. He waited until they had settled before speaking. "We will accept the human terms," he said. The room erupted in chaos. Admiral Ez, the new commander of the home fleet, slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot surrender without a fight. We have 12,000 ships across the Empire. If we recall them all, if we make a stand here, we can at least die with honor." "Honor?" laughed bitterly. "What honor do we have left? Our ancestors committed genocide against a species that posed no threat to us. We have spent 500,000 years celebrating that genocide as a noble act. We have continued to conquer and enslave every civilization we encounter. We are exactly what the humans say we are." "They are primitives," as insisted. "They were primitives when we destroyed them, and they remain primitives despite their weapons. We cannot bow to such creatures." "Those primitives just destroyed 800 of our best ships in 6 minutes, replied, "without suffering a single casualty. Admiral, or was the finest military mind our species has produced in generations, and he died before he could fire a second shot. How many more fleets do you want to sacrifice before you accept the truth?" As had no answer. Minister Is spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "Even if we accept their terms, how can we trust them? They have waited 500,000 years for revenge. How do we know they will not destroy us anyway once we have disarmed?" "We do not know," admitted. "But consider the alternative. If we refuse, they will certainly destroy us. They have the power. They have the will. Our only hope is that they meant what they said about choosing justice over revenge. It is a small hope, but it is more than we deserve." The council debated for another 30 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt. When the hour ended, contacted the human fleet and informed Commander Lisa Monroe that the Dominion accepted her terms. "You have made a wise choice," Lisa said. "We will send observers to every system in your former empire to ensure compliance. You have 1 standard year to complete the dissolution." "And what happens if we fail to meet the deadline?" Lisa's expression did not change. "Then we will conclude that your acceptance was a delaying tactic. We will respond accordingly. Do not test our patience. We have waited 500,000 years. We can wait a little longer if necessary, but we would prefer not to." The transmission ended, and was left alone with the weight of his decision. He had just agreed to destroy everything his ancestors had built. The greatest empire in the history of his species would be dismantled in a single year. Future generations would remember him as the leader who surrendered without a fight. But at least there would be future generations. That was more than the humans had been given. Over the following months, the dissolution proceeded according to plan. Human observers arrived in every system, their ships easily able to outrun or destroy any vessel that tried to interfere with their mission. Conquered species were freed one by one, their chains broken by beings they had never seen before. Billions of slaves walked free for the first time in their lives, many of them weeping as they realized their nightmare was finally over. The military was dismantled piece by piece. Warships were stripped of their weapons and converted to cargo vessels or simply scrapped. Weapons factories were shut down and converted to peaceful manufacturing. Training academies were closed, their instructors reassigned to civilian duties. The vast military machine that had terrified the galaxy for millions of years simply ceased to exist. Some resisted. A few colonial governors refused to release their slaves or disarm their fleets. They spoke of pride and honor, calling for others to join them in defiance. The humans dealt with these holdouts quickly and efficiently. They did not negotiate. They did not threaten. They simply arrived with overwhelming force and destroyed everything that refused to comply. Within weeks, no one else tried to resist. Commander Lisa Monroe watched the dissolution from the bridge of the remembrance. She felt no joy in what she was doing. There was no satisfaction in watching an empire crumble, even an empire as cruel as the Dominion had been. She was not doing this for pleasure. She was doing it because it was necessary. Daniel Burke stood beside her as they reviewed the latest reports. "The L system has completed its disarmament," he said. "That was the last holdout. All 300 systems are now in compliance." Lisa nodded slowly. "And the freed species?" "Most are returning to there. Some are forming new alliances with each other. A few have asked for human protection. Granted to any who request it. We did not come here to build an empire, but we will not abandon those who need our help." Daniel hesitated before his next question. "What about themselves? Some of the freed species want revenge. They are talking about attacking Prime, killing the civilians, making them pay for what they suffered." "That will not happen," Lisa said firmly. "They accepted our terms. They have with every demand. They are no longer a threat to anyone. If we allow others to destroy them now, we become no better than they were. Some would say they deserve it." "Perhaps they do." Lisa turned to look at him. "But that is not the point. We spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. We could have become monsters in that time. We could have let our hatred consume us, transform us into something as terrible as the... But we chose a different path. We chose to be better. That choice has to mean something, Daniel. It has to guide us even when it would be easier to simply kill everyone who wronged us." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You are right, Commander. I apologize." "Do not apologize. It is natural to want revenge. The question is whether we act on that want or rise above it." Lisa turned back to where the stars shone cold and bright. "Humanity was nearly destroyed because we were weak. We have made ourselves strong. But strength without wisdom is just another form of weakness. I refuse to let us fall into that trap." The dissolution continued. One by one, the chains of the Dominion were broken. One by one, the slaves became free. And through it all, the human fleet watched and waited, ready to act if necessary, but hoping that it would not be. They had waited 500,000 years for justice. They could wait a little longer for peace. 1 year after the fleet arrived at Prime, the dissolution was complete. The Dominion existed only in history books. 300 star systems that had once been part of a great empire were now independent worlds, free to chart their own destinies. 12 conquered species had regained their freedom, their cultures and traditions no longer suppressed by their former masters. Billions of slaves had become citizens of their own nations, able to live and work and love without fear. They themselves had kept their word. They retained only their and 2 colony systems, a tiny fraction of what they had once controlled. Their military was gone, replaced by a small defense force barely capable of protecting their remaining territory. Their monuments to conquest had been torn down, replaced by memorials to the species they had destroyed. Their children were learning a new version of history, one that did not celebrate genocide as a noble act. Commander Lisa Monroe gathered the fleet at a point in empty space, far from any star or planet. 7,000 ships hung in the darkness, their crews waiting for her announcement. She stood on the bridge of the remembrance, surrounded by officers who had served with her for decades. Daniel Burke stood at her right hand, as he always had. "The mission is complete," she said, her voice broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "They have paid for what they did. The species they enslaved are free. Justice has been served." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. Some were crying. Others were simply staring into the distance, processing emotions they had carried for their entire lives. They had all been born with a single purpose, raised to believe that one day they would avenge their ancestors. Now that day had come and gone, and they had to find new meaning in their existence. "But our work is not finished," Lisa continued. We did not spend 500,000 years preparing just to destroy our enemies. We prepared so that we could rebuild, so that we could reclaim what was taken from us, so that we could finally go home. The changed, showing a familiar image, a blue planet orbiting a yellow star, white clouds drifting across continents of brown and green, oceans that sparkled in the sunlight. It was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. Earth. The planet had healed over the plasma bombardment had destroyed everything on the surface, but the world itself had survived. Asteroid impacts had brought new water to refill the oceans. Volcanic activity had regenerated the atmosphere. Life had crawled up from the deep ocean vents where some organisms had survived the destruction, spreading across the land in forms both familiar and strange. The planet was wild and empty, waiting for someone to return. "This is our home," Lisa said. "The home our ancestors lost. The home we have dreamed of for 500,000 years. Today we are going back." The fleet began to move, 7,000 ships sliding through folds in space toward the Sol system. They emerged at the edge of the asteroid belt, where the seed ships had launched so long ago. From there they could see the same sun that had warmed the faces of their most distant ancestors. They could see the other planets, the gas giants and rocky worlds that humans had once dreamed of colonizing. And they could see Earth, small and blue and perfect. The colonization ships descended first. They were different from the warships, designed not for destruction but for creation. Each one carried genetic samples preserved across the complete DNA of every plant and animal that had existed on old Earth. Each one carried equipment for terraforming and building, for planting forests and constructing cities. Each one carried humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Lisa watched the ships descend through the atmosphere. They landed on every continent, spreading out across a world that had been empty for longer than most civilizations existed. Within hours, the first structures were being built. Within days, the first crops were being planted. Within weeks, the first animals were being born, creatures that had not walked the earth in 500,000 years. Daniel Burke stood beside her as they watched the progress reports come in. "It will take generations to fully restore the planet," he said. "Yes," Lisa agreed. "But that is all right. We have waited this long. We can wait a little longer." "What will you do now, Commander? The war is over. The mission is complete. What purpose is left for a warrior without a war?" Lisa smiled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, there was genuine warmth in it. "I think I would like to see Earth with my own eyes. I have only ever seen it in images and recordings. I want to feel the grass under my feet and the sun on my face. I want to breathe air that was not manufactured by machines. I want to know what my ancestors knew before they took everything from them." A shuttle was prepared for her, and she descended through the clouds alone. She landed on a grassy plain that had once been called the Midwest, a place where millions of humans had lived and worked and raised their families. Now it was empty, covered in wild grasses that swayed in the wind. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white with snow. A river glittered in the afternoon sun, flowing toward an ocean that no human had seen in 500,000 years. Lisa stepped out of the shuttle and onto the soil of Earth. The grass was soft beneath her boots. The air smelled of flowers and rain and growing things. Birds sang in the distance, descendants of creatures that had survived in underground caves during the long winter after the bombardment. The sun was warm on her face, yellow and familiar despite being so far from the worlds where she had spent her life. She stood there for a long time, just breathing. Generations of her family had dreamed of this moment. They had passed down stories and images and memories, keeping alive the hope that one day their descendants would return. Now she was here, standing on the soil of humanity's birthplace, breathing the air her ancestors had breathed. Tears ran down her face, but she did not wipe them away. She let them fall, let them soak into the earth that had given birth to her species. She cried for the billions who had died when they came. She cried for the countless generations who had lived and died in exile, never seeing the world they dreamed of. She cried for herself, for the burden she had carried all her life and could finally set down. And then she laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed across the empty plain. She was home. After 500,000 years of wandering, humanity was finally home. Other ships began to land across the planet. Cities would rise where cities had stood before. Forests would grow where forests had grown. Humans would fill this world again, building a civilization to honor those who had been lost and those who had sacrificed everything to make this moment possible. A memorial would be built at the landing site, a simple stone marker with words carved deep enough to last for ages. Those words would be read by generations, yet unborn, by children who would grow up knowing only Earth as their home. The words would remind them of what their ancestors had endured and what they had achieved. We were lost, but we found our way home. We were broken, but we rebuilt. We were forgotten, but we remembered. We are humanity, and we endure. Lisa Monroe read those words one last time as the sun set over the reborn Earth. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, colors she had only ever seen in ancient recordings. Stars began to appear, the same stars her ancestors had looked up at when they dreamed of reaching the heavens. Somewhere out there, the freed species were building new lives for themselves. Somewhere out there, they were learning to be something other than conquerors. And here on this small blue world in an ordinary star system, humanity was finally at peace. The long journey was over. They had come home.